this second lesson of our mini unit. Again, more review from the semester, which will also relate to our topics today. With the scramble for Africa resulting in the Berlin Conference in 1888, we had all of these European countries trying to claim territory in Africa. Britain claimed the most territory, remember, from Cairo to Cape Town, and that famous image of Cecil Rhodes. Then we had France claiming much of North Africa, and even though it was mostly the Sahara Desert, there was still a great deal of territory. And then in third place, it's probably a bit of a tie between Germany and Belgium. The European country that is noted for their cruel treatment of the natives, that would be Belgium in the Congo. Remember, King Leopold was so obsessed with wealth. The genocide of the Congolese, where they cut off the hands of the men to intimidate the other men of the village to make sure that they would meet their daily quota. And then Germany's scattered territories. Remember, Germany's territories were scattered in Africa because they had only recently become a country as of 1888. After World War I, those territories are then taken from Germany and given to other countries. So in this case, we'll be talking about some of the territories that are taken from Germany and given to other European countries. But first, the European Union. The motto of the European Union is unity in diversity, a very kumbaya, world peace group motto. It goes back much further, though, than our modern understanding. It goes back to the 1950s and right after World War II. The purpose of the European Economic Community was to help make trade easier amongst the countries of Western Europe. And if you look at the countries that wanted to belong to this EEC, it really is just traditional Western Europe. It doesn't involve Spain. They were under the fascist dictatorship of Francisco Franco. If you look at the eastern part of Europe, that was all part of the Soviet sphere. And then Switzerland, sort of that part in the middle, Switzerland always likes to be independent. So they start creating this idea, how can we work together, how can we cooperate through our economies, and hopefully if these countries all rely on each other, we will be less likely to go to war with each other. In a more modern sense, this starts happening, our modern understanding of the EU, in 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty. The Maastricht Treaty starts talking about, these are countries that are interested in a single common currency. So it is the Maastricht Treaty that will make the euro possible. The other element is the Schengen area, which is about free travel. With all of these different borders, even for trade, it could be very difficult every time you crossed a border to go through customs, to go through all the things traditionally associated with borders. So the Schengen area makes it possible for both the economy and for the civilians to travel, to trade, to be from one country and work in another and retire in a third. And so this makes the Europe that is familiar to us now possible. There are membership requirements. Your country must have some element of democracy. You pay a membership fee, essentially to belong to the European Union, and that you will be a part of this European Parliament, and your people will then also become citizens of the EU. The sort of organization is headquartered in Brussels, Belgium. So almost like the United Nations, each country will send representatives to Belgium, and in the European Parliament, they will discuss laws and regulations for all of the members of the European Union. The leader of the European Union changes every year from country to country. So it'll be France one year, and then it'll be Italy, and then it will be Estonia, and then it will be the Czech Republic, so as not to allow one single country to become too powerful. What we are most familiar with in terms of the EU is the euro, of the currency. Now, there are a number of countries who belong to the European Union but do not use the euro. For example, Great Britain. The countries that do use the euro are called the Eurozone, and that phrase gets used all the time in the news. One issue with this common currency is there will be countries who end up sort of taking up the slack. For instance, the pigs countries they've been called. Portugal, Ireland or Italy, Greece, and Spain. These are countries that in the last 5 or 6 years have struggled economically. They are part of the Eurozone, so they're all part of this common system, which means that the countries who have strong economies in the Eurozone end up having to support the little countries. So that means mostly Germany and France end up supporting some of the other countries. This is one major criticism against a common currency. For Great Britain, this is exactly why they're very glad they never joined the Eurozone. They are part of the EU, but they aren't part of the Schengen area, and they aren't part of the Eurozone. So they have some of the benefits, but very few of the requirements. If you look at this map, you can see how over time this idea of a common European community has spread throughout the continent. Again, it just is starting with Western Europe, and then with the fall of communism, it's possible for these ideas to spread into the former Soviet Union. Now we're going to talk about Rwanda, and this is where our Take 5 comes into play. Rwanda is this very, very small country you can see in orange there. It used to be part of that German empire, but then in 1919, when those territories are taken from Germany and given to everyone else, this area of Rwanda is given to the Belgians. And what the Belgians do is they create sort of like a national identification system, like driver's licenses or passports. And in addition to just the regular biographical information, they want to make sure that the people from this area put their tribe on here. Now, I still find it shocking that even with the atrocities in the Congo, that just 10 years later, the world community is willing to give control of something else to Belgium, but they do. The two tribes that the Belgians end up sort of antagonizing are the Hutu and the Tutsi. The Belgians sort of use this tribal animosity to make sure that they maintain control in the region. So for many, many years, the Hutu and Tutsi tribes dislike each other. One thing that we've talked about a lot this year is how when people in a room drawing lines on a map, creating borders, it never quite works because they're not taking into consideration the people who live in that region. And that's exactly what happened by drawing this border around what we call Rwanda and not considering the tensions and the background between these two tribes. In 1994, there was already a lot of tension. The Hutus made up 85% of the population of Rwanda. Then, in April of that year, the current president, who was Hutu, his plane was shot down and he was killed. So this is going to start off the violence where we have the Hutu majority starting to kill Tutsis. And in the video clip we watched in class, he called it a low-tech genocide. They are using primarily these machetes to just go neighborhood to neighborhood, door to door, and are ruthlessly killing the Tutsis. In the video we saw, it also mentions how the UN attempted to maintain peace. The UN had already been in the region, and primarily Belgian. There's Belgian and Polish soldiers who were there representing the UN. And again, we see that they are largely ineffective because they say, no, stop it. But this animosity runs so deep, these tribal conflicts that had existed for generations. The UN is essentially forced to evacuate all of their personnel because it is so entirely violent. After about 3 months, the violence dies down, and over 800,000 people had been killed in that short amount of time. Once the violence has died down, the Hutus panic. They realize what they have done, and they fear retribution. They fear punishment. So many Hutus actually leave Rwanda and end up in Tanzania, Congo, Uganda, places where we are now seeing problems. If you remember the whole issue with Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army and the child soldiers. A lot of that comes from the Hutus leaving Rwanda in 1994. The results, the world is made aware of another instance of genocide where they didn't do anything, where they didn't step in and take action. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of people died. For those that survive, they often are left with these machete scars, this constant reminder of the violence that was acted against them, or lots of cases of of limbs that had to be amputated because these weapons were so harsh. And it really was about a different ethnicity, a different people group. Once again, we talked about it in the previous class, we've talked about it all semester long, that these differences are tearing people apart because of their hatred, because they can't see that these other people are created in the image of God, because they're not believing in our Creator God. And just like we've talked about with the threads of history, that humanity without faith in and reliance on God eventually creates destruction.